Everyone mocked the intern who helped a fallen old man, not knowing he was the CEO's father. The parking garage of Tower 1 in Manhattan was crowded with executives rushing to make their morning meetings. Their polished shoes clicked sharply against the concrete as they passed without stopping. In the middle of it all, an elderly man lay on the ground, his navy coat torn, silver hair out of place, and blood running from his scraped hands. He struggled to move, pain etched across his face. Dozens of employees walked past, eyes fixed forward, unwilling to risk being late. No one paused, except one young woman. Aaliyah Johnson, 22, an intern at Phoenix Global, knelt beside the man, placing her coffee aside. Her blazer and skirt were modest, her hair tied back neatly, but her attention was fixed only on him. "Don't move, sir. Let me help you," she said, steadying his arm as he tried to sit up. She didn't know his name. She didn't know that the man she was helping was Robert Wellington, the powerful father of the company's CEO. By stopping to help when no one else would, Aaliyah was about to change her entire future. Where are you watching from today? Don't forget to subscribe for tomorrow's story of courage and consequence. Let's begin. The towers of Manhattan's financial district rose like monuments to wealth and competition. Among them, Phoenix Global Industries stood out, not just for its glittering glass facade, but for its reputation as a place where only the toughest survived. The company was known for its aggressive culture, one where performance was everything and kindness was often mistaken for weakness. The halls buzzed with ambition, every conversation carrying the weight of deals worth millions. Status at Phoenix Global wasn't just professional, it was personal. The floor you worked on, the office you sat in, even the brand of suit you wore became signals of your worth. Executives walked the corridors with calculated confidence, while interns and junior analysts struggled to keep pace, often hiding their exhaustion behind forced smiles. Promotions were scarce, and mistakes could end careers overnight. Into this world stepped 12 interns, each hoping to secure one of only 2 permanent analyst roles at the end of the program. For them, every day felt like a test, every assignment a silent competition. They weren't just expected to work hard. They were expected to outperform one another, constantly proving who was most deserving. Aaliyah Johnson stood out among the group, though not for the reasons some of her peers admired. At 22, she carried herself with quiet determination. Raised in Harlem by her grandmother, she had learned early that respect was earned through hard work and honesty. Her grandmother's lessons stayed with her. Always treat others with dignity, never forget your roots, and measure success not by wealth but by character. Still, stepping into Phoenix Global each morning was like entering a different universe. The marble lobby, with its sweeping staircase and walls lined with expensive art, felt a world away from the modest apartment she shared with her grandmother. She wore the same navy blazer and pencil skirt in rotation, pressing them carefully each night to keep them looking sharp. Her natural hair, neatly tied in a bun, was a quiet statement of pride, even though whispers in the office hinted that some found it unprofessional. Her colleagues came from vastly different backgrounds. Jennifer Park, for example, was the daughter of a corporate attorney and a real estate developer. She wore designer dresses that seemed to change daily, her confidence amplified by family connections that guaranteed her a network of support. Bradley Chun, another intern, arrived each morning in tailored suits that his father, a hedge fund manager, had paid for. His stories at lunch often revolved around private schools, ski trips, and internships arranged through family friends. For Jennifer and Bradley, Phoenix Global wasn't just an opportunity. It was a continuation of the privileged paths they had always known. For Aaliyah, it was a fight to prove she belonged, to show that someone without wealth or connections could succeed in the most competitive environment on Wall Street. The program itself only added to the pressure. Interns were given complex financial models to complete overnight, asked to prepare presentations with impossible deadlines, and quizzed on market trends during meetings. Any hesitation, any misstep, could become ammunition for rivals eager to climb ahead. The unwritten rule was clear: don't just succeed, make sure others fail. Aaliyah often worked late, her desk lamp the last one glowing as the rest of the office emptied. She double-checked every number, reread every report, determined not to give anyone an excuse to dismiss her. Yet she couldn't ignore the subtle comments from her peers. Jennifer once joked, loud enough for others to hear, that Aaliyah's shoes looked too budget for Phoenix Global. Bradley casually suggested she should smile more during meetings if she wanted to be noticed. These remarks stung, but Aaliyah remembered her grandmother's advice: hold your head high. Their opinion doesn't define your worth. Despite the pressure and the whispers, Aaliyah carried herself with grace. While others boasted about who they knew or how many hours they worked, she focused on the job itself. Her reports were precise, her ideas thoughtful, and her attitude grounded in respect for colleagues at every level. From janitors to senior partners, she greeted everyone with the same warmth. Few noticed, but those who did respected her deeply. Phoenix Global was a place where appearances mattered, where power seemed to belong only to those with money and influence. Yet within this culture, Aaliyah's quiet persistence set her apart. She wasn't the loudest voice in the room, nor the most connected, but she carried with her values that the corporate world often overlooked. Unbeknownst to her, those values would soon collide with an unexpected moment, one that would test the true meaning of success at Phoenix Global. Robert Wellington began his mornings with a discipline he had carried for decades. At 75, he still rose at 6, read the financial news with his black coffee, and walked the short distance from his residence to Phoenix Global's Tower 1. Though officially retired from daily operations, he remained the company's chairman emeritus, a quiet presence whose influence lingered in every boardroom decision. That morning, the September air was sharp as he entered the underground parking garage. He moved carefully, his old leather briefcase in one hand, adjusting his coat with the other. He disliked relying on his driver for short trips. Walking gave him a sense of independence he wasn't ready to surrender. As he crossed the concrete floor, his shoe caught on a loose edge near the elevator entrance. The stumble was sudden. His body struck the ground hard, his palms scraping against the rough surface. Pain flared through his knees as he tried to shift, the briefcase sliding out of reach. For a moment, he simply lay still, catching his breath. The cold ground seeped through his coat, reminding him of his age more than he wanted to admit. A streak of blood spread across his hand where the skin had broken. He attempted to push himself up, but his leg trembled under the weight. The sound of footsteps filled the garage. Several employees in tailored suits strode past, their conversations brisk, their gazes fixed straight ahead. One man glanced briefly at Robert, then quickly away. A woman in red heels hesitated for a second, then kept moving, phone pressed to her ear. Not a single person stopped. Robert's jaw tightened. Pride told him to push harder, to get up on his own. He had built an empire by never showing weakness. Yet at that moment, he could not mask his vulnerability. A new set of footsteps approached, quicker, lighter. Aaliyah Johnson, carrying her coffee and work bag, slowed as soon as she noticed the man on the ground. Her eyes widened at the sight of his bloodied hands and disheveled coat. Without hesitation, she set her coffee aside and knelt beside him. "Sir, are you all right?" Her voice was steady but gentle. Robert tried to wave her off. "I'm fine. Just clumsy this morning." He attempted another push upward, but his arm faltered. "Don't strain yourself," Aaliyah said firmly. "Let me help you." She slid one arm carefully behind his back, the other bracing his forearm, guiding him slowly into a seated position. Her movements were cautious, as though she were assisting a relative rather than a stranger. He studied her expression. There was no trace of pity, only genuine concern. That unsettled him more than the fall itself. "You've scraped your hands," she noted, pulling a small pack of tissues from her bag. She pressed them lightly against the cuts to stop the bleeding. "Do you feel dizzy? Any pain in your chest?" Robert gave a short laugh despite himself. "You sound like a doctor." "No, just someone who doesn't like seeing people hurt," Aaliyah replied. Her sincerity was disarming. With her steady support, he managed to stand. Though still unsteady, he kept his shoulders square, determined to hold onto his dignity. "Thank you," he said, his voice softer than before. Most people would have walked right past. "I noticed," Aaliyah replied quietly. "But that doesn't make it right." They moved toward the nearby elevator, her hand discreetly steadying his arm. Robert tried to mask his limp, but she adjusted her pace to match his without comment. As the doors opened, he reached into his coat and pulled out a black keycard. Aaliyah didn't think much of it at first, assuming it was a standard access card. She pressed the button for the lobby, but he scanned his card for the top floors instead. "I never asked your name," she said, keeping her tone light as the elevator began to rise. "Robert," he answered. "Robert Wellington." The name registered faintly in her mind, but she didn't make the connection. She simply smiled. "I'm Aaliyah. Intern." "Well, Aaliyah," Robert said, leaning slightly on the railing, "I'm grateful you stopped." She shrugged modestly. Anyone would have. But they both knew that wasn't true. Through the tall lobby windows of Tower 1, a few interns caught sight of Aaliyah guiding the injured older man toward the executive elevators. Their expressions shifted from curiosity to smirks as they leaned closer to get a better look. To them, the scene wasn't an act of kindness. It was material for ridicule. Jennifer Park was the first to speak. Her tone carried the sharp edge of superiority as she nudged Bradley Chin. "Look at her," she said, "playing Florence Nightingale for some random old guy in a torn coat. Does she think this is a hospital rotation?" Bradley chuckled, adjusting his cufflinks. "Honestly, he looks like someone who wandered in off the street. Maybe she thinks helping random homeless guys will get her extra credit." Amanda Sullivan, another intern standing nearby, joined in. "It's embarrassing, really. She's supposed to be competing for an analyst position, not volunteering for community service projects in the parking garage." Their laughter carried across the marble floor, just loud enough to draw the attention of other junior employees. Some joined in with snide comments. Others simply smiled awkwardly, unwilling to appear sympathetic toward Aaliyah. What began as a few remarks grew into a chorus of mockery. The focus wasn't just on the act of helping, but on who was helping. Jennifer smirked as she added, "She really doesn't know her place, does she? Always trying to act like she belongs here. It's almost cute, almost." The words stung for Marcus Rodriguez, another intern standing a few feet away. He watched Aaliyah's figure disappearing into the executive elevator, her steady hand on the man's arm. Marcus respected her work ethic. He had noticed how often she stayed late to finish reports, how she treated staff others overlooked. Unlike Jennifer or Bradley, Aaliyah never carried herself with arrogance. Yet Marcus also knew the culture of Phoenix Global. Speaking up could mean social exile among the interns, maybe even professional consequences. Loyalty among peers was a form of currency here, and defending Aaliyah would be seen as weakness. He forced a laugh when Bradley caught his eye, though it rang hollow in his own ears. Inside, he felt the weight of guilt pressing harder with every passing second. Meanwhile, Jennifer continued her performance, lowering her voice into a mock imitation. "Oh, sir, let me clean your cuts, let me hold your arm." Next she'll be asking him if he needs a blanket. The group erupted again, their laughter echoing across the polished stone of the lobby. The racial and class undertones hung heavy, unspoken yet clear. To them, Aaliyah wasn't just the intern who helped a stranger. She was the young black woman from Harlem who didn't fit the polished image they thought Phoenix Global demanded. Her act of kindness became another excuse to highlight her difference, to suggest she lacked the sophistication or detachment they equated with success. Amanda shook her head, still smirking. "This is Wall Street, not some neighborhood volunteer program. She'll never last if she keeps pulling stunts like that." No one challenged the remarks. Senior staff members walked past, overhearing snippets of the laughter, but none intervened. At Phoenix Global, it was easier to stay silent than to confront cruelty. Marcus shifted uncomfortably, his jaw tight. He wanted to speak, wanted to remind them that compassion wasn't weakness, that their mockery said more about them than about her. But the fear of being targeted himself kept him still. In this environment, solidarity was rare, and self-preservation was the unspoken rule. As the elevator doors upstairs closed around Aaliyah and the man she had helped, the lobby returned to its rhythm of clicking heels and hurried conversations. Yet the sting of that moment would linger. For Aaliyah, the whispers and laughter that followed would not go unheard. And for Marcus, the memory of staying silent when he should have spoken would remain with him long after. At Phoenix Global, acts of decency were easy to dismiss, but the consequences of ridicule had a way of lasting far longer than the laughter itself. The elevator hummed softly as it carried them upward. Aaliyah stood beside Robert, steadying his arm while he leaned against the rail. She pressed the button for the lobby, but to her surprise, Robert scanned a sleek black card. The light blinked green, and the floor display jumped straight to the 40th level, one reserved for the highest executives. She glanced at him, confused but silent. Most interns never saw those floors. Access required clearance that even mid-level managers didn't have. Her curiosity grew, but her focus remained on making sure he was steady. When the doors opened, Aaliyah stepped into a world she had only heard about. The executive suite stretched out before her with polished wood panels, soft rugs, and art that looked like it belonged in a museum. Assistants moved briskly between glass-walled offices, their conversations low and efficient. Heads turned immediately toward the older man at her side. Mr. Wellington. A sharp voice cut through the quiet. Margaret Collins, his longtime executive assistant, rushed forward. Her face reflected both alarm and relief. "What happened to you?" She took his arm gently, examining the blood on his hands. Robert gave a small wave as though brushing off concern. "Just a stumble in the garage, Margaret. Nothing more." Margaret's eyes moved to Aaliyah, who still held his briefcase. Recognition of the situation spread quickly across the suite. Whispers began among staff who realized that the chairman emeritus, rarely seen in public spaces, had entered injured, accompanied not by security or family, but by an intern. Before Aaliyah could process the weight of it all, two security personnel approached. They had been alerted by Margaret's call, their expressions tense. One of them spoke quietly into a radio, and moments later, the sound of quick footsteps approached from the far end of the corridor. Christopher Wellington, the CEO of Phoenix Global, appeared in a dark tailored suit, his presence commanding immediate attention. His gaze fixed on his father, and in an instant his expression shifted from executive composure to urgent concern. "Dad, what happened?" Christopher closed the distance quickly, placing a hand on Robert's shoulder. "I'm fine," Robert insisted, though his voice betrayed fatigue. "A simple fall." Christopher wasn't convinced. His sharp eyes moved to Aaliyah. "You helped him?" Caught off guard, Aaliyah nodded. "Yes, sir. I found him in the garage. He was hurt, so I stayed with him." Christopher's gaze softened, though his voice remained controlled. "Thank you." The room seemed to hold its breath. For the interns and employees who had mocked Aaliyah earlier, the revelation would have been staggering. The man they dismissed as a stranger was Robert Wellington, one of the most respected figures in the company's history. But for Aaliyah, the realization came more slowly. The name clicked at last, Wellington. Robert Wellington. She had studied case studies of his leadership in business classes, his strategies quoted in lectures as examples of corporate foresight. She was now standing beside the very man whose vision had built Phoenix Global's empire. Her heart raced, but her concern didn't fade. "He should see a doctor," she said carefully, still addressing Christopher but glancing back at Robert. "His hands are bleeding, and he might have injured his leg." Robert gave a tired chuckle. "She's persistent. You'd think I'd broken both legs the way she's carrying on." "Persistent or not, she's right," Christopher replied firmly. "You're going to the company physician." He gestured to security, who prepared to escort Robert gently toward the medical office down the hall. As they moved, Robert turned back to Aaliyah. "Thank you again," he said with sincerity that cut through the formality of the setting. "You could have walked away. You didn't." Aaliyah lowered her eyes slightly, not out of shame but humility. "It was the right thing to do, sir." For a moment, Christopher studied her with quiet intensity, as though weighing more than just gratitude. Around them, the suite had resumed its professional rhythm, but the moment lingered. In the span of minutes, Aaliyah had crossed an invisible line, from an intern mocked in the lobby to the young woman who had offered genuine care to the founder of Phoenix Global's legacy. She didn't yet know what it would mean for her future. But Robert Wellington knew. Christopher Wellington knew. And the echoes of that single choice would soon reach far beyond the 40th floor. After the parking garage incident, Robert Wellington's curiosity about the young intern grew into a careful, deliberate investigation. He had spent decades learning how to read people, not just their words, but the intentions behind them. The way Aaliyah had approached him, the steadiness of her hands, and the concern in her voice had left a lasting impression. Unlike so many others in the office, her kindness had not been performative. Robert began quietly gathering information about her performance. He asked Margaret Collins for detailed reports, spoke to her team leads, and checked notes from the intern program directors. What emerged painted a picture of a professional who quietly excelled without drawing unnecessary attention. Aaliyah had taken it upon herself to help train the new computer system for the administrative staff, ensuring the transition went smoothly. She noticed small errors in reports that could have embarrassed senior analysts and corrected them without fanfare. She had volunteered her weekends mentoring high school students from Harlem interested in finance, an initiative she handled without seeking recognition or praise. Each discovery impressed Robert more. Here was someone whose accomplishments were real, concrete, and selfless. She had never lobbied for attention, never tried to leverage connections, and never appeared concerned with status. Her work had impact, yet she remained grounded, a rare combination in a world where image often outweighed substance. Robert also learned about the treatment Aaliyah had endured after helping him. Several employees had openly mocked her, questioning her motivations and ridiculing her actions. Comments about her not knowing her place, and suggestions that she was naive or ambitious for personal gain reflected a culture that celebrated appearances over integrity. Even after her identity as the helper of the chairman emeritus became clear, whispers persisted, demonstrating how deeply entrenched the cynicism in the office had grown. Meanwhile, Christopher Wellington, observing the dynamics from the CEO's vantage point, grew increasingly interested in Aaliyah. He began using legitimate reasons to visit the intern floor more frequently. He attended project reviews, checked in on weekly updates, and occasionally asked questions about her work. Each interaction allowed him to watch how she treated colleagues, how she approached challenges, and how she responded to small but important ethical decisions. One moment stood out sharply in Christopher's mind. Jennifer Park, an intern who had been among the first to ridicule Aaliyah, struggled with a complex financial analysis. The project required combining market trend data with a predictive model, and Jennifer's frustration was visible. Aaliyah approached quietly, offering guidance in a patient and non-judgmental way. "Are you helping me after everything?" Jennifer asked, surprised and somewhat uncomfortable. Aaliyah smiled, calm and direct. "We're all trying to learn here. It doesn't matter who is unkind. You still deserve support when you need it." Christopher watched from a short distance, unseen. He recognized that this was a defining moment. Aaliyah's actions demonstrated integrity beyond professional obligation. She had no personal interest in aiding Jennifer, no expectation of reward, and no desire to correct past wrongs. She was simply acting according to her values. Robert Wellington's reports aligned with what Christopher observed. Aaliyah's performance evaluations consistently praised her initiative, accuracy, and willingness to collaborate. Yet none of these reports captured the full scope of her character. The quiet strength, the empathy, the courage to act with decency even in the face of ridicule. The contrast between Aaliyah and other interns became increasingly clear. Some interns focused only on achieving high marks or securing visibility with senior staff. Their actions were strategic, calculated, and often devoid of genuine concern for others. Aaliyah's approach was different. She solved problems, offered help, and navigated challenges without thinking about who was watching or what might be gained. Christopher reflected on how rare this was in the environment of Phoenix Global Industries. Decades in leadership had shown him many skilled, ambitious professionals, but few who embodied kindness as consistently as Aaliyah. The more he observed, the more he realized his interest in her went beyond admiration for professional competence. He was intrigued by her perspective, moved by her ethics, and drawn to the authenticity that radiated in every interaction. Meanwhile, Robert Wellington continued his private inquiries. He spoke with staff who had worked alongside Aaliyah, learning about her reliability, creativity, and fairness. Every anecdote reinforced his impression that she was not only talented, but also guided by principles uncommon in the corporate world. Her ability to act decisively and compassionately without concern for office politics distinguished her in a landscape dominated by hierarchy and calculation. The process took several weeks, but each observation and report solidified a single conclusion for both Robert and Christopher. Aaliyah Johnson represented a combination of competence and character that had the potential to influence not just individual projects, but the company as a whole. By the end of this period, Christopher had witnessed enough to recognize the emerging pattern. Aaliyah's ability to maintain composure under pressure, assist colleagues even when they had been dismissive or cruel, and act without seeking reward had shifted his perspective. He understood that her impact extended beyond measurable work outcomes. It touched the culture of the office itself. Her presence challenged assumptions about leadership, loyalty, and integrity, and offered a model for the values he wished to see embraced at Phoenix Global. Christopher's respect for her grew into something deeper. While the corporate setting had initially framed their interactions, he increasingly considered Aaliyah not only as a promising professional, but as a person whose character aligned with principles he deeply valued. He found himself anticipating opportunities to engage with her, to observe her reasoning, and to understand her worldview. By helping Jennifer Park, Aaliyah had revealed an essential truth. Her actions were not influenced by others' opinions or office politics. They reflected an internal consistency of values. For Robert, this confirmed that his initial impression in the parking garage had been accurate. This young intern possessed judgment, courage, and integrity. For Christopher, it marked the beginning of a personal connection that extended beyond professional boundaries. In the competitive world of Phoenix Global, where ambition often overshadowed ethics, Aaliyah's approach offered an example of leadership through action rather than authority. Her presence challenged the norms of the office and suggested a path toward a more balanced, humane corporate culture. Both father and son recognized that her influence, once nurtured, could resonate far beyond her initial position in the intern program. Christopher Wellington approached the idea of meeting Aaliyah with care. He understood the delicate balance of power and perception in a corporate environment, and he wanted to ensure that any interaction would feel respectful, natural, and free from professional pressure. After observing her over several weeks, he decided on a discreet approach. A brief, thoughtfully worded message was sent through the company's scheduling assistant, proposing lunch outside of the office, in a neutral location where they could speak freely. Aaliyah hesitated when she received the invitation. She understood the potential complications. He was the CEO, she was a new employee, and any misstep could be misinterpreted by colleagues. Yet the sincerity of his message, combined with the respect she had seen in his interactions, persuaded her to accept. She suggested a small cafe in Little Italy, a place far removed from Midtown's corporate scrutiny, where they could meet on neutral ground. The first lunch was quiet at first, filled with the polite small talk typical of initial meetings. Christopher was careful not to dominate the conversation, and Aaliyah, initially cautious, responded with measured openness. As the meal progressed, their discussion turned toward broader topics. Christopher spoke about the isolation of his position, the difficulty of forming authentic connections in a world dominated by wealth and status, and the challenge of evaluating people beyond their resumes and appearances. Aaliyah listened intently, sharing her own perspective. She spoke about growing up in Harlem, the lessons her grandmother had instilled about integrity and human dignity, and her desire to use finance as a tool to help communities rather than solely to accumulate wealth. She explained her approach to her internship, focusing on learning, helping others, and making meaningful contributions rather than chasing recognition. Christopher found himself drawn to her worldview. Her honesty, humility, and commitment to principles resonated with him in a way that no performance report or professional accolade ever had. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of ease in conversation, a rare connection with someone whose values aligned closely with his own. Aaliyah, while still cautious, began to sense that Christopher's interest extended beyond professional mentorship. He asked questions that revealed genuine curiosity about her life, her motivations, and her perspective on the industry. Unlike other senior executives, he did not speak to impress her with wealth, titles, or accomplishments. Instead, he listened, reflected, and shared his experiences with honesty and vulnerability. As the weeks passed, these lunch meetings became a regular practice. They met once a week throughout November and December, each meeting deepening their understanding of one another. Topics ranged from the ethics of investment practices to social inequality, from career aspirations to personal experiences that had shaped their character. Through these conversations, mutual respect grew into a quiet admiration. For Aaliyah, the relationship was complicated by awareness of the power dynamics. She considered the office gossip, the opinions of peers, and the social implications of becoming close to a CEO. Yet the authenticity of Christopher's attention, his consistent respect for her autonomy, and his willingness to listen without judgment encouraged her to engage more openly. She began to share anecdotes from her past, revealing the challenges she had overcome, the losses she had endured, and the lessons that guided her approach to life and work. Christopher, in turn, found himself inspired by her resilience and perspective. Her ability to navigate a competitive environment without compromising her values impressed him deeply. He observed how she treated staff, peers, and even those who had been dismissive of her with patience and fairness. These qualities, he realized, were rare in any professional setting, and they reflected a character he could admire personally as well as professionally. Over time, moments of levity and shared laughter entered their meetings. They discovered common interests beyond the workplace: books, music, and ideas about urban development and philanthropy. These small, informal touches made the connection feel natural and genuine, rather than contrived or transactional. The developing relationship required careful navigation. Both recognized that discretion was essential. They spoke openly during lunches, but maintained professional boundaries in the office, mindful of appearances and potential rumors. Their mutual respect and clear communication created a foundation of trust, allowing them to explore the growing personal connection without compromising either of their positions. As December progressed, Aaliyah began to recognize the depth of her feelings. She valued Christopher's insight, his attentiveness, and the respect he consistently demonstrated. His presence encouraged her to reflect on her own ambitions and values, reinforcing her belief in pursuing work and relationships grounded in integrity rather than appearances or advantage. Christopher, similarly, realized that his admiration for Aaliyah had evolved into something more personal. He found himself looking forward to their conversations, thinking about her insights long after the lunches ended, and considering how her perspective might influence not only his decisions as CEO, but also his understanding of leadership and human connection. By the end of December, the regular lunches had become a steady rhythm, offering a space where both could speak freely, challenge ideas, and explore shared values. Aaliyah had grown more comfortable in the relationship, recognizing that while the professional hierarchy existed, the lunches created a space where they could interact as equals. The connection they had built was rooted in mutual respect and shared principles rather than convenience or status. Aaliyah's actions had consistently demonstrated compassion and integrity, and Christopher's response reflected a recognition of those qualities. The weeks of quiet conversation and thoughtful exchange had created a bond that extended beyond professional admiration, hinting at the potential for a meaningful personal relationship built on trust, understanding, and shared values. By the time the holiday season approached, both understood that their connection was significant. While careful and measured, their weekly meetings had fostered a rare intimacy, the kind of understanding that comes from recognizing the core values and intentions of another person. In a world where status, power, and appearances dominated interactions, they had found common ground through honesty, thoughtfulness, and shared purpose. Their lunches were no longer just professional check-ins or casual discussions. They had become a space where authenticity prevailed. Each conversation reinforced the growing admiration, trust, and care they felt for one another, creating a foundation that neither wealth nor hierarchy could undermine. Aaliyah's promotion came quietly but decisively. The news arrived in an email from Human Resources. She had been offered a full-time analyst position. It was a validation of months of dedication, careful work, and a steadfast commitment to doing things correctly rather than taking shortcuts. She read the message twice, absorbing the significance of moving from intern to a permanent role, a place where her efforts would continue to matter. The office, however, had begun to murmur with rumors. Her association with Christopher Wellington had drawn attention. Whispers circulated about favoritism, impropriety, and the idea that her career advancement might be tied to her growing connection with the CEO. Aaliyah felt a mix of irritation and determination. She knew the truth. Her promotion was earned, and her work spoke for itself. Yet the gossip gnawed at the edges of her confidence, reminding her that merit alone did not shield anyone from judgment in a high-powered environment. The annual holiday party at the Rainbow Room in Rockefeller Plaza approached, a hallmark event for Phoenix Global. The city's skyline stretched beyond the windows, lights reflecting on polished floors, a backdrop for corporate celebration. Aaliyah arrived in a modest, elegant dress, understated yet refined. She felt the weight of expectation, sensing the eyes of colleagues measuring, questioning, and comparing. Jennifer Park, who had once mocked her in the lobby, allowed a smirk to cross her face as Aaliyah moved through the crowd. Bradley Chun murmured with a few peers about the intern playing high society. The comments were subtle but cutting, aimed at her appearance and perceived position rather than any tangible flaw. Aaliyah reminded herself of her worth, keeping her posture straight and steps measured. Her confidence was quietly unshakable, grounded in her own actions rather than their opinions. Christopher arrived later in the evening. He had been observing from a distance, noting the undercurrents, the subtle dismissals, and the thinly veiled critiques aimed at Aaliyah. He moved through the room with purpose, approaching her with a calm assurance that spoke to the connection they had built over weeks of lunches and conversations. When he reached her, he extended his hand and asked, "May I have this dance?" The question was simple but carried weight. It was not only an invitation to share a moment on the floor. It was a declaration, visible to everyone in the room, confirming the bond between them. Aaliyah's initial hesitation faded as she accepted. The movement of joining him symbolized more than companionship. It was acknowledgement of respect, admiration, and shared values. Across the room, Robert Wellington watched with quiet approval. His presence added another layer of significance. The father of the CEO observing the woman who had helped him, whose actions had revealed integrity, compassion, and resolve. His gaze carried pride, a silent acknowledgement that the right decisions and the right people were now recognized in tangible ways. As the music shifted, a familiar melody filled the room. "The Way You Look Tonight." Christopher led Aaliyah onto the dance floor. The steps were smooth, deliberate, and attentive, reflecting the trust and growing intimacy between them. Each movement mirrored the mutual respect that had been carefully cultivated over months, turning an ordinary corporate celebration into a moment of personal triumph. Whispers and sidelong glances continued among some colleagues, but their murmurs no longer carried the same weight. The symbolic nature of the dance, combined with the public affirmation of their relationship, shifted perceptions. Aaliyah's dignity and grace, paired with Christopher's clear respect, rendered gossip impotent, leaving only admiration and quiet acknowledgement among those willing to observe with honesty. The dance concluded, and for a brief moment, the crowd's focus faded into the background. Aaliyah and Christopher shared a glance that spoke of understanding, achievement, and the subtle triumph of character over preconception. The room buzzed with conversation, yet their connection felt insulated, a private acknowledgement of months of effort, mutual respect, and personal courage. In that moment, Aaliyah realized the significance of what had occurred. Her promotion, the rumors, the scrutiny, all of it had led to this point, not through compromise or manipulation, but through persistence, integrity, and the quiet power of consistent action. The dance was a milestone, a public confirmation of a bond built on trust and authenticity rather than social expectation or corporate politics. Christopher's hand rested lightly on her back as they navigated the dance, signaling both attention and care. The movement was unhurried, deliberate, and entirely respectful, reinforcing the authenticity of their connection. Aaliyah's initial fears about judgment and perception were replaced by a clear sense of validation, not for appearances, but for the alignment of values and character. Robert Wellington, still observing, allowed a small nod of satisfaction. The man who had once fallen in a parking garage, aided by someone he did not yet know was remarkable, now saw her acknowledged in a way that transcended office hierarchy. Her actions had earned recognition, respect, and personal affirmation, weaving together the threads of professional success and personal integrity into a visible, celebrated moment. As the night continued, the dynamics of the office subtly shifted. The symbolic act of dancing with the CEO, witnessed by colleagues and executives alike, redefined the narrative surrounding Aaliyah. No longer the intern who had been the subject of cruel speculation, she was recognized as a person whose intelligence, compassion, and consistency demanded respect. The music ended, applause echoed in polite bursts, and Aaliyah felt a quiet satisfaction. She had navigated the complexities of corporate hierarchy, gossip, and perception, emerging not only with her professional standing intact, but with a sense of personal accomplishment. Christopher's presence, supportive and affirming, emphasized that their relationship had moved beyond conjecture to genuine acknowledgement. For the first time, Aaliyah fully recognized the culmination of months of effort, ethical action, and quiet resilience. The holiday party, the scrutiny, the promotion, and the dance were not merely isolated events. They were interconnected milestones that validated the importance of doing what is right, treating others with respect, and maintaining integrity even when under pressure. By the evening's end, the crowd's attention had shifted to other celebrations, but the significance of the dance lingered. Aaliyah walked through the Rainbow Room with poise, her confidence strengthened by experience and reinforced by Christopher's public acknowledgement. The symbolic moment had crystallized the lessons learned. Character, courage, and sincerity can transform perception and command respect. Under Christopher Wellington's leadership, Phoenix Global began to shift. The once relentless focus on individual achievement and ruthless competition gave way to a system that valued collaboration, innovation, and mutual support. Teams were encouraged to work together, share knowledge, and mentor one another rather than jockey for attention through petty rivalry. Meetings no longer became arenas for self-promotion. They became spaces for productive discussion and problem-solving. Employees who once hid their talents for fear of jealousy found recognition for their contributions. Policies were rewritten to reflect this new ethos. Promotions considered character, teamwork, and integrity alongside performance metrics. Workshops and training sessions emphasized leadership that empowered others rather than dominating them. Christopher personally mentored interns and junior analysts, creating a visible example that success could coexist with empathy. He made it clear that those who treated colleagues with respect and worked to lift others would be valued as highly as those who produced measurable results. Recruitment expanded beyond traditional feeder schools. Diverse candidates from underrepresented communities were actively sought out, not merely to fill quotas, but to introduce fresh perspectives and foster a culture where merit and potential mattered more than pedigree. Intern programs were restructured to give every participant meaningful opportunities to contribute, ensuring that talent from any background had a fair chance to thrive. Aaliyah became a symbol of this transformation. Her relationship with Christopher was built on shared values rather than social advantage, demonstrating that personal integrity and professional competence could coexist with personal happiness. Colleagues who once doubted her ability now recognized the significance of her character, her empathy, and her unwavering dedication. The mockery that had once followed her faded into memory, replaced by respect and, in some cases, admiration. Robert Wellington reflected often on the events that had set everything in motion. From his fall in the parking garage to observing Aaliyah's conduct within Phoenix Global, he realized that true leadership was not defined by wealth, position, or influence alone. It was revealed through small acts of kindness, moral courage, and the ability to recognize potential in others. He understood that decisions made quietly, without expectation of reward or recognition, often had the most profound impact. He observed the company flourishing under Christopher's guidance, aware that the structural changes he implemented were rooted in the lessons of that single morning. It was proof that culture could evolve when leaders prioritized ethics and human decency over status and power. The man who had once been helped by an intern now witnessed the transformative power of empathy reverberating throughout the organization. Aaliyah's simple act of compassion, stopping to assist a fallen stranger, had catalyzed a series of events that reshaped corporate culture. Her example inspired colleagues to reconsider their behavior, reminding them that professional advancement could be achieved without sacrificing humanity. Employees began volunteering for mentorship programs, offering guidance to newer team members, and approaching their work with a renewed sense of responsibility to others. The incident also illuminated the difference between success and fulfillment. Robert often noted that the measures of wealth and position alone could never replace the satisfaction derived from ethical action and genuine relationships. Observing Aaliyah and Christopher together reinforced this understanding. Authentic connections formed through shared values and mutual respect held more weight than any title, salary, or social expectation. Aaliyah and Christopher's relationship became an emblem of this philosophy. Their bond was neither performative nor strategic. It reflected a deep alignment of purpose and morality. For employees witnessing it, the couple's partnership demonstrated that love and professional respect were not mutually exclusive. One could build a meaningful personal life while remaining committed to ethical leadership and excellence at work. Over time, Phoenix Global's reputation evolved. Industry peers began to recognize the company not only for its financial performance, but also for its progressive, humane approach to leadership. Clients, investors, and employees responded positively to a culture that fostered integrity and encouraged collaboration. The firm became a model for how ethical practices could enhance productivity, morale, and long-term success. For Aaliyah, the personal rewards were significant. Her career advanced, yes, but she also experienced a deeper satisfaction in knowing that her decisions, small, deliberate, and kind, had measurable influence on the environment around her. She witnessed colleagues grow, policies improve, and a workplace transform because someone had chosen compassion over convenience. The impact of that choice extended far beyond the initial moment of crisis in the parking garage. Christopher's perspective also matured through these events. He learned that leadership required humility and attentiveness to the unseen qualities in others. Recognizing potential, valuing ethical conduct, and prioritizing collaboration over competition became central to his approach. His bond with Aaliyah reminded him that success was richer when shared, and that genuine relationships reinforced professional achievements. Robert Wellington continued to marvel at the chain of consequences set off by an ordinary act of help. He considered how often life's pivotal moments go unnoticed, and how small gestures can reverberate unexpectedly, producing outcomes that exceed any measure of expectation or ambition. The story of that morning became, for him, a testament to patience, observation, and acknowledgement of human decency. In the end, Phoenix Global had become more than a financial powerhouse. It was a community where actions mattered, kindness was noticed, and individuals were celebrated for who they were rather than the social position they held. The lessons of character, courage, and compassion were visible in daily interactions, policy decisions, and the personal lives of its leaders. This story proves that character always wins in the end. True success isn't measured by the size of a bank account, but by the size of your heart. The ripple effect of choosing kindness, of valuing others, and of acting with integrity is immeasurable. Where are you watching this story from today? Drop your location in the comments below, and subscribe to see more stories that remind us what really matters. Every act of compassion, no matter how small, has the power to transform lives and shape legacies.